Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name's Jay Izso, and oh, man, do we got another great show for you. It's so easy. I say it every week. Get a great author, get a great book. My job's easy. I just literally just have to read the book. That's all I have to do, read the book. It serves its own questions. And I know I kind of, try to get into your head, like, well, what do I want to know, right? And then I try to ask those questions. And of course, if you're watching us live, LinkedIn, 3 Facebook pages, X, YouTube, wherever, you can always ask your questions. Just come in. I'm just telling you, my authors always will answer those questions for you the best of their ability. I promise you they will. Author's name, Brian Biro. The book, Lessons from the Legends, New Applications from the Timeless Wisdom of John Wooden and Pat Summitt. Oh, my. Absolutely outstanding read. By the way, when I tell you that it is a quick read, it really is a quick read. It's a very fast read, but hold on to your hats, because if you read it too fast, you're going to miss the nuggets of wisdom for success in leadership, in life, and in business. They're all right here from 2 of the greatest coaches in men's and women's basketball, John Wooden and Pat Summitt. And Brian Biro has done an amazing job of synthesizing them and put together this, what I would call a book that you should have carry with you all the time when you get stuck somewhere and you're wondering, well, what's going on with my team? Pull out a chapter and go, how's the friendship, loyalty, and cooperation going? Pull out a chapter, discipline yourself so no one else has to. Pull out a chapter, skill, right? But just pull it out and go, okay, am I missing something? What am I missing? I promise you there is an answer here in the book. That's what I promise you. I've read it twice. I have abused this book. It is more yellow highlighted and dog-eared. The pages used to be straight, but I've dog-eared about every other page. So good, so great. And Brian Biro is here with us. So let me introduce you to him, because he is absolutely fabulous. Brian Biro. I said Biro. I meant Biro. He told me, and I blew it the one time. Brian Biro is a world-class motivational speaker and author. He's known as America's Breakthrough Speaker. He also was known as America's Breakthrough Coach, because he had clients that included companies such as, you may have heard of these: Starbucks, Southwest Airlines, Microsoft, Kaiser Permanente. And they'd hire him to help build their teams and keep them focused on success in their business, right? And business strategies. Here's the thing about him. And when he's speaking, he combines practical, actionable, real-world advice with stories from his own life, the lives of folks like John Wooden and Pat Summitt, that illustrate how to motivate yourself and inspire those around you. His latest book is this one, Lessons from the Legends, New Applications from the Timeless Wisdom of John Wooden and Pat Summitt, is an insightful and practical guide to success in leadership and life and business. Absolutely an outstanding book. I've read it twice, and I have enjoyed it each time. He's a remarkable author, speaker, and his message truly reflects his energy, enthusiasm, excitement, and joy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Brian to the show, and Brian Biro, welcome to A New Direction, my friend.
Coach Jay, that's the greatest introduction ever. I'm honored to be with you.
Well, thank you for coming on. Let's dig right in. We got a lot to cover, and I know we are not going to have enough time, because I've got like 20 pages of notes, and there's no way I'm going to get through them all. So we have these 2 giants, these 2 legends, John Wooden and Pat Summitt. I'm going to start with Pat Summitt, and we're going to just dig into some of their, what I think is some of their greatest highlights in terms of what they believed, what they were passionate about, and how they led, and how they tried to inspire success in others. The first one I'm going to talk. We'll start with Pat Summitt, Tennessee Volunteer, head basketball coach for I can't remember how many decades. Until Connecticut came on the scene. When you thought about national championships, you thought about University of Tennessee women's basketball is what you thought. And she was responsible for that solely. But the first thing she said when it comes to developing a team is developing others is respect yourself and others. Let's talk about why for her respecting yourself and others is so critical for her.
Well, I think that the starting place is that everything about both John Wooden and Pat Summitt was about character. They both were, you said they're the two of the greatest coaches, arguably the two greatest coaches in basketball, in college basketball, but they really were even better people coaches. That's what they really coached, was people. That's what they mattered the most to them. And so what they realize is that until you learn to respect yourself, you're not going to respect others. And that was Pat Summitt's cornerstone, is that we may not have people who necessarily are best buddies off the court, but we've got to build this respect within ourselves. That comes from living with character. That comes from following your principles. That comes from never blaming others, but really looking to take responsibility. And so her foundation was, we may not all get along the greatest. Coach Wooden said this, I loved it. He said, I never had a player I didn't love. Had a few players I didn't like that well, but I have never had one I didn't love. And that's really getting down to the heart of, I want to build this foundation of a team based upon respect, that I can count on you and you can count on me. And that starts by knowing that you're going to live according to your principles, focus on controlling your controls.
I have found that to be an interesting cornerstone for her, because it certainly came through, having watched women's basketball when it was not nearly as possible, as popular as it is today. Having watched her teams play, they played, and of course so many of her players went on to the WNBA and still are, but are now coaches, for sure. But I found that piece, this cornerstone piece of respect. She says that the essential ingredient required to transform talent into a team is when you go from me into we, and that was respect. That was powerful for me.
Absolutely. I mean, I often talk about the real breakthrough to build a team is to move from ego to we go. They each had that foundational idea that everyone matters, everyone's important. Coach Wooden's recipe, or his metaphor that he used for a team, was an automobile. Right, kind of coming up when he grew up in the 30s. Those were the hot new inventions, really. And what he said was, you may have a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a Bill Walton. Well, they're the engine, but guess what? That engine ain't going to run if there aren't tires, right? And those tires are going to fall off if there aren't lug nuts. So they all matter. There's all a place to respect each and every element within that team. And when you get that going, that helps each person feel that they're significant, they're important, they contribute. Right? They also both believed, and this is a foundation of respect, that the best thing about human beings is that we'll do more for others than we'll do for ourselves. In other words, the best thing about us is that we can care about other people. And when you bring that into that team concept, you see, when you look at sports, what's the big difference? Some people say it's athletic talent. I don't believe that. I believe it's cohesion, it's chemistry, it's mindset. And that's where they really believe they can make the biggest difference. One really interesting thing, Jay, that I actually never thought of till you just brought it up just now. I even wrote the book. Coach Wooden used for his model of life the pyramid. It was very specific. In other words, his idea was that if you pull out a block of the pyramid, it's going to collapse. Coach Summitt had the definite dozen, but hers was a circle. And so in her estimation, none was more important than the other, that they were all, and similarly with John Wooden, in that if you pull one out, the whole thing will fall down. But I basically take the starting place in the book of respect, because that's really probably her most important word. But she saw that every single element in her definite dozen was as important as the other, and that they connected that full circle. And only when the full circle is in place could you reach your potential.
I thought it was interesting, and I love that, by the way, the full circle with Pat Summitt and the pyramid with Coach Wooden. I found it so eerily interesting how similar their thought processes were. They may not have used the exact same words, but they were very similar. So I'm going to go to number 2 that she has, which is take full responsibility. Coach Wooden says basically the same thing, in a slightly different way, but about basically being self-accountable, but taking full responsibility. First of all, I think it's something that I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, Brian. I have no idea, but I feel that that's a skill. I'm going to call it a skill. I don't even know if it is one, but I feel it's a skill that we don't see enough of, and that's taking full responsibility or self-accountability. And and they both said something very similar. It's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit.
Yeah.
Talk to us about
credit is something you give. Credit is something you give. Responsibility is something you take. I wrote this book, Jay, because of taking full responsibility more than anything else. Because over my lifetime, and I've been around a while, one of the things that has, I guess, distressed me, challenged me, is seeing a reduction in people's focus on taking full responsibility. In other words, to me, the single most destructive word in the language of a team or a family or a country or any organization is the word BLAME, blame.
Oh, yeah.
Blame kills teams. And there's a very simple reason, and both Coach Wooden and Coach Summitt understood that. If you think about blame in the context of time, is blame about the past, the present, or the future?
Right.
It's always about the past.
Yeah.
Whenever you're so whenever you find yourself blaming somebody, you are in the past. We're thinking about the past. No, all you can do is learn from it. So both John Wooden and Pat Summitt were devout blame busters. They didn't care about blaming people. They cared about learning. All right. And at the foundation of taking full responsibility is the other key element. I'm seeing so much more blame in the last 10 years than I've ever seen in my lifetime before. It's more whenever there's a challenge, we look to who can I pin this on rather than what can I do to get better. I love the quote that I put into the book from another great coach, Brian, who said, "I'm just an old country plowhand, but if I've learned one thing, if you want to get a team's heart to beat as one, when things go great, they did it. Things go pretty good, we did it. Things go bad, I did it." And what that represents at the foundation and the cornerstone of taking full responsibility is genuine humility. And it's interesting that both Pat Summitt and John Wooden, to me, perhaps the two most important elements in who they were humility and presence. Humility, see, we've gotten this weird idea, Jay. I'm interested to see what you think about it. Some people today think that you can't be confident and humble. And you can't be further from the truth, because being humble doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you think of yourself. But the real reason why humility is so crucial to taking responsibility is that only those who are humble, if you think about it, are lifelong learners. Because only those who are humble would rather make a mistake and learn from it than to pretend they're always right. I look at your bookshelf behind you and I see a man of humility who's always looking to learn from every book he reads, from every person he interviews, that all of us have something that we can learn from another person. But until you take responsibility that you would rather learn, all right, than always be right, you'll never take full responsibility because you're completely driven by the need for external approval. And that is crippling. And both of them focused, if you look at both of their what they believed to be success, it wasn't about what anybody else thought. It wasn't even about championships. John Wooden, 27 years at UCLA, never said the words winning or losing to his players. He never said words. Did he want to win? Oh, yeah. But what he wanted was them to look at success, at the decisions you make inside and the way you live according to those decisions. The success is peace of mind. It comes from knowing you've given the best of what you're capable. Pat Summitt was the exact same way. Did she want to win? Oh, with fire. But she also could look at winning a game and feeling that her team did not play the way they needed to play. And to her, that was much more important to learn from that, to grow, and for herself to do the same. When UConn came on the scene all of a sudden, and they were using, a Jackson offense from the Chicago Bulls. She was kind of blown away by how well they played. What did she do? She took responsibility and said, I got to go learn how to deal with this. I got to learn how this works. Next year, same teams, University of Tennessee turned it around because she took full responsibility. It's a big thing. If we teach our children that, then we're not making excuses. We're not blaming others. All right. We're not beating ourselves up either. What we're doing is saying, okay, this is what we did. What can I learn? How can I use this to be better tomorrow? And that's really where the book came in. And it's a beautiful thing. And at the heart of my inspiration to write a book, two people who I think epitomized taking full responsibility.
I think when people look at the books and they ask me about, the 500 plus books I've read since I've been doing the show. And they ask me about it. And I say to them, here's what you learn when you do this. You realize that I have maybe read 500 books. Do you realize how many have been published since I've started the show? I said, I'm not even a drop in the bucket. I don't even make a drop, because there's so much more. Every time I read a book, I recognize there's so much more I don't know. And and it becomes so overwhelming to me that I go, I don't have enough of a life left to learn as much as I want to learn, because I look at it and go, it's so vast. And I literally walk away, like even reading your book, and I loved your book, I did, but I walk away from I don't know anything. I just don't know anything. and you go, there's so much, because you go, okay, well, everything that it's really nothing. And you go, and then the other thing is, okay, you read it, and I'm trying to apply it. I'm voraciously taking the 20 pages of notes, because I do that with every book so that I can have it, because I want to try to not just read it. I want to try to apply it back. And then you realize, man, there's only 2 or 3 things I can do at a time. I can't do I can't do 150 pages of a book and put all of it into implement it right away. And then that becomes a little overwhelming to me. And it goes, doggone it, why can't the brain just work faster, right? And you and I are both psychology, from a psychology background. So it's like, man. And then to see these 2 legendary giants in their field be able to just take that and run with it is so beautiful to watch. And I'm going to move to the next thing that comes up for both of them. And it was their ability to be a communicator. And chapter 4 is learn to be a great communicator. And I just want to read something that you wrote about Coach Summitt. You said it didn't matter. Coach Summitt thought she had been extremely clear if she thought she was clear, articulate, or inspiring. What mattered to her was far more practical and fundamental. Had her communication worked? Question 1. 2, had it generated her desired outcomes? And 3, had it led to understanding the results? And then 4, was she sure she truly had communicated what she intended? Wow. We don't ask those questions about our communication. You know what we do? We just throw it out there. We assume that everybody understands us. But both of them took that communication to a whole nother level that we should all go to. Talk about that.
Absolutely. Imagine what this world would be like if everyone lived by that simple principle you just enunciated from Pat Summitt, which says essentially the meaning of my communication is the response I get. In other words, it ties right back into taking full responsibility. That if you don't get it, that's on me to find another way. It's kind of like, what do we do when we go overseas to try to communicate in a different language? We speak English and we just talk louder. All right. We say the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. That's kind of what we're doing in communication when we just throw it out there. You have to pay attention to, is this actually connecting? And one of the things that I think both of them mastered over time, and what's fun about that chapter, and I'm sure you just caught on to it right away, both of these were people who were deathly afraid of speaking in front of people when they started out. John Wooden's greatest fear was public speaking when he started out. In fact, he told me this, the only reason that he kind of overcame that was because his wife, Nellie, forced him to take a speech course. And he was terrified. Pat grew up in, rural Tennessee. She was long and gangly. She was a good basketball player, and she felt kind of funny about her accent. And so she too was terrified of speaking in front of people. But they recognized that the only way they could make a difference, the only way they could impact others, was to get over it. And they get over it. I think the essence of what they mastered was first that taking responsibility for my communication. I don't care how beautiful it sounds. If you're not getting it, I got to change me. I'll tell you a fun, quick little story about that, Jay. Personal story. I'm a professional speaker. I've spoken all around the world for 35 years. It's what I love. It's what I was put on earth to do. I did a program a few years ago called the TOS program in the state of Texas. And the TOS program is a program for high school seniors that says that unless you pass this test, you cannot graduate. And you're given 5 chances in your senior year to pass this test. At that time. Well, the program that I went to teach for a 2-day program to speak at was a 2-day program for kids who had flunked it 4 times. All right, and we were 2 weeks before they had their last chance to try to help them develop whatever it took to pass that test. Well, first thing I realized was there wasn't one of these kids who wasn't smart enough to pass the test. They had just checked out. They had just given up. And what they wanted from me as the teacher was they wanted me to give up because it was easy for them. It was easy. If I don't try, I didn't do it. If I don't try, I can't lose because I never put myself into it. And I was trying to pour myself into it. I was thinking I was being the greatest orator of all time. And I'm looking at these kids and they're falling asleep. And it was right then that thought, my communication is a response I get, grabbed hold of me and made me. And what I said to these kids, look, and I'm watching them using that key that John Wooden about. One of the most important blocks in the pyramid is, and as I'm looking at the kid, I stopped. I said, it could change your lives much more than just pass a test, and you're not getting it. Looking at these kids, and then I see them going, "We got him. He's giving up on us. Yeah, that's where we got him, where we want him." And I said, it would be so easy for me right now to say, "What's wrong with you?" And they're looking at me like, "We got him." And if I did that, I'd be dead wrong. I said, if you're not getting it, it's because I'm not a good enough teacher. If you're not getting it, it's because I haven't found a way to help you see what's already inside of you. And so the next thing I did was I took the biggest risk I've ever taken in front of a room. I told them a story that I've only written about. I've never said it in a seminar except that day, about my best friend when I was growing up, who we did an intervention for because he was addicted to cocaine. It's a powerful story. And the intervention worked. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Well, the next day, we all broke boards together. The kids were like turned around. I got a letter from one of the kids a week and a half, 2 weeks after the results came out from the test. And 21 of these 25 kids who had failed it 4 times passed it. And it hit me that none of that could have happened if I had not taken responsibility for my communication and realized it didn't matter how good it sounded. If it wasn't working, I got to change me.
That's beautiful. His name is Brian Biro. The book is entitled Lessons from the Legends, New Applications from the Timeless Wisdom of John Wooden, Pat Summitt. Absolutely outstanding book. Wherever books are sold, get yourself a copy. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Folks, let me talk about Zoundy. It is the ultimate game changer for authors, publishers, professionals. Listen, here's the deal. Zoundy empowers you to leverage your audio book to build and capture a contact list, target non-traditional markets. Here's the deal. I have Zoundy. I'm about to speak at a conference coming up here in July. And they put a code together and a special code for me. And I give away a free copy of my book to everybody in the conference, audio copy. And here's the deal. When they download the copy, I have their email and I can communicate with them about what they'd like to see in the book, what that their criticisms are, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they would like to see me write next, what they'd like to see me talk about next. It's absolutely fantastic. You need to check it out. Go to zoundy.com, ZOUNDY.com. Use my code zoundy.com/J, J-A-Y, and then use the code JAY25. That's JAY25, unlock special savings. I'm telling you, it is a great platform. It is unbeatable when it comes to the audiobook space. Check them out, zoundy.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for more than 40 years, you know what they've done? They've helped people transition in life. I know what you're saying, but they do real estate. What does that got to do with life? Think about it. Every place you've ever lived, it's been a life transition. They know how to take the stress out of it. They've been doing that successfully for thousands of people for 40 years. Check them out. I'm telling you, they're known as the legends of customer service. Just go to lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. You'll be so glad that you did. And we're back here on A New Direction with Brian Biro and the book, Lessons from the Legends, New Applications from the Timeless Wisdom of John Wooden, Pat Summitt, two legends of their own. One of the things that Pat says, and we'll talk about maybe a little bit more in depth here as we go along when we get to Coach Wooden, is make hard work your passion, is how Coach Summitt looked at it. Coach Wooden would say, be industrious. And he would couple that with enthusiasm as his two cornerstones of the pyramid. But both of them were about hard work, but make it passionate. Be passionate about it. Do it with enthusiasm. Talk to us about the importance of not just doing hard work, but doing hard work enthusiastically because you want to.
Absolutely. And I'm smiling because as I look behind you, I see your book called Lessons from the Farm. Yeah. And the foundation of both John Wooden and Pat Summitt was they both were farm kids. Yeah, they had to do chores, at 5 o'clock in the morning before they went to school. They had homework that was expected to be done. They had chores to be done at night after practice. So they both grew up on the farm, and the farm is all about work. But here's the key. They both understood something, what both their parents taught them. Interestingly, Coach Wooden's parents, his father was very much like he was. He was a gentleman, a kind man, got his point across. He was very straightforward and honest. Pat Summitt's dad was kind of scary. He was big and tough and strong. Her mother was the rock. Her mother was the one who taught hard work completely through example. But that was for both of them. What they gained from it was that here, I know so many people we use the terminology hard work. And for most people, hard means hard. It's difficult. It's painful. All right. No, what they wanted you to understand was and that's the way it is if you don't couple enthusiasm with industriousness. All right. Industriousness without enthusiasm, hard work without enthusiasm becomes becomes painful, something that you don't want to keep doing. You force yourself to do it. Whereas anyone who's ever achieved greatness in any field whatsoever is looking for the joy, the passion, the fun. As I said, I love speaking. I love what I do. I can't wait to get on that stage. When I'm on stage, I'm 25 years old. I get off stage, I'm 70. Okay, but on stage, I'm 25. Right? I actually keep track of my steps sometimes on the stage. And if I'm doing an hour and a half talk, I'll do 15,000 steps on a stage. But I don't feel it because it's all so filled with enthusiasm. It's flowing out. I love how many of us spend too much of our lives, and both of these understood it. And that's why they coupled hard work, make hard work your passion. That's what Pat Summitt said. John Wooden said, industrious without enthusiasm will become turmoil. Enthusiasm without industrious will become unrealized potential. All right. So the key here is to live your life from a want to, choose to, like to, love to, can't wait to standpoint rather than a have to. When you say, I do this hard work, rather than I love doing this work. I love pushing myself to my limits. It's a completely different standpoint. And that's what they really taught everyone that they work with, that there is nothing better than the feeling inside of you that comes from knowing you've given the best of which you're capable. and it's completely a choice.
I think the piece here, Brian, that we make the mistake of doing is, and I think this is where it's gotten messed up over time. We give advice, not you and I, but people will give advice, follow your passions, right? But I think it's the wrong advice. I think it is find passion in your work. And if you can't find passion in your work, then find work that you can find passion in it. And I think you can take any job that we do, and I think you can find passion. And a lot of people will say, what's your why? What's your work purpose? What's the purpose in it? And I do. And listen, I agree. I think those things are really helpful. But I have to tell you, I agree with you. I love speaking. I've said to people, there's no stage too small or too big that I will not stand on and speak to you for several hours if I can. And I have also said this about coaching. There is not, I feel guilty sometimes I take money, to coach people because I love it so much, because there's nothing greater than inspiring people to become better than they are and meet their potential. And I don't mind the hard work. In fact, I enjoy it. I find it a challenge. I find it something that I wake up to every day going, what's the pieces in the puzzle? What's the pieces in the puzzle I can work on today? That's exciting to me. How do I get this team to come together? How do I get this person to get to that next level? And it becomes so exciting, just like it does for you when you're on stage. It's like, whether it's 1 or 1,000, right? How can I communicate the message that I have in such a way that somebody gets an aha moment and walks out of the auditorium and goes, oh my gosh, I'm moving. That's what excites me. That's where the passion comes from. And I don't mind doing the work. In fact, I love doing the work because I know if I'm getting better, then I believe they're getting better.
You see, and you've hit such a cornerstone of how all of these elements we're talking about, the lessons from the legends, connect to each other. Because both John Wooden and Pat Summitt's essence was focus on what you do control and let go of the stuff you don't control. Right. Focus on your energy, your effort, your attitude. Well, that's where you get the passion to love what you do. It shows up in who you are, Jay. You love to learn. Why? Because you constantly want to get better. And that passion makes reading those books, taking those 20 pages of notes, getting up on the stage and trying to get better every time you get up on the stage. It makes it not tedium. It makes it not, oh, here we have another one. It's not about the money. It's about the essence of I'm growing. I'm focusing on those things that I do control. And this is at the cornerstone of this entire book, is that too many people are driven by two needs that absolutely cripple you if you want to live a great life. One is the need for external approval. John Wood, what I love about John Wood and Pat Summitt, we look back on them now at their careers and go, wow, they were legends. The year before John Wooden won his first national championship, he was known as the coach who couldn't win the big one, the coach who couldn't beat Cal. All right. That he had never made it to the NCAA finals. All right. He was thought of as a really good coach who couldn't win the big one. Kind of funny looking back at it right now. Pat Summitt went to 8 Final Fours before she won her first championship. Now, if they were all about external approval, all right, then they would have been crushed, but they weren't. They were constantly looking, okay, what's the next step I can take? What can I learn? How can I get better? John Wooden would pick out one thing every off season. And in those days, there actually was an off season, all right, where he would study an aspect of the game. And imagine this, Jay. Imagine you're a high school coach and it's 1973. And John Wooden is just, has won now, 9 national championships in 11 years. And he shows up at your camp because he's heard you're really good about certain ways of really creating better rebounding. And he would be there. He'd be sitting in the front row taking notes from this high school coach. That's understanding that what he focused on was what he put in. And Pat Summitt exactly the same way. And that comes from taking full responsibility. That's why they took responsibility to become great communicators when it was probably the thing they hated more than anything else in the world to learn. And by the end, they were both great public speakers. All right. Because they put passion, you hit it on the head, put a passion into the things that you choose. and focus on the things you control. Shaping your future, focus on your vision, focus on your energy. Your energy is your choice, and focus on that you have the opportunity to build people, build teams, and build relationships.
You know, I found, reading this twice, I found, so many similarities between the two. They may have stated it slightly different, but they both, it's so amazing that they both had the same kind of thought process, which, can be attributed. And of course they were successful, even though they really weren't focused on the outcomes. They were just really focused on the process, which, by the way, I have come to learn about Nick Saban too, was that when he was coaching, it was focused on the process, not the outcome. The outcome takes care of itself. But one of the big things that they both said, and this is chapter 8, is about putting the team before yourself. Coach Wooden said it slightly differently. And you've been in a lot of businesses when you were coaching. You were coaching a lot of businesses, and I know you were in a lot of sales teams and everything like that. One of the most difficult challenges I see in business is that putting the team before yourself. I think it is one of the largest challenges that any business has. And sadly, and you tell me what you've seen, but sadly, I feel the team is slowly deteriorating because we're putting ourselves before the team and not the team before ourselves.
I totally agree. It's at the heart of writing this book. Again, John Wooden and Pat Summitt never took credit for national championships. They talked about their players. They talked about their assistant coaches. They were incredibly loyal, not just when you were there, but when you weren't there. They understood that loyalty doesn't come from demanding other people to be loyal to you. It comes from being loyal to others. That's at the heart of teamwork. That is at the understanding that everyone on every team is important. And you hit it on the head. I've seen it in my business career. I tell the story about my own company. When I left, I was a U.S. swimming coach for my first career. Loved it, but I had no life. It's the only reason I left coaching was I wanted to have a little more balance in my life. Probably the only guy who ever went to get an MBA to get a life instead of a job. And then I had my corporate career. And my corporate career started out, I was working in a large transportation company. And I was amazed, Jay, because we weren't a team. Operations hated sales. Sales hated operations. They both hated the home office a little bit more. And that just made no sense to me because most people don't want to do operations. And operations people are in operations because they don't want to do sales. And neither one of them want to do the administration. And so what changed our company wasn't from the outside. It wasn't from the marketplace. I actually started doing team building events in our own company, all about put the team above yourself. Because one of the things that always astonished me, and I know you've had this from your career in coaching, was what I call the relay paradigm. And it didn't matter whether when I was a swim coach, whether I was talking about kids on a national level or beginners, something magical happened when they got on a relay. They almost always did better than they did in their individual event in the same distance and same stroke. Why? Because they had a purpose that was bigger than themselves. They had other people that they refused to let down, and it brought out their best. I tell a story in the book about the greatest relay I've ever seen in my life about a swimmer named Jason Lezak. It was the year that Michael Phelps won 8 gold medals. The first one was the one that made it possible. And it was the man who had finished in the bronze medal place in the 100-meter freestyle, Jason Lezak from the United States, starting behind the greatest 100-meter freestyle in the world, who was from France, a body length behind, but the team was bigger than him. And he swam 2 seconds faster than he ever swam in his life on that relay because the team was more important than himself. We've got to get back to that. That's why I wrote this book about 2 people who live that. Because here's the secret. There's a benefit to this that comes back to you. And that is whenever you seek to enrich others' experience, whenever you put the team first, you can't help but enrich your own. Because you stretch yourself, you teach yourself, you push yourself, you put yourself in new positions you never would have gone to if there wasn't that bigger goal of really making a difference for the people that matter to you. So it worked in our company. When we became a team, up until we started doing these events that were team building events, there was never a salesperson at an operations meeting. After we did it, we always went to each other's meetings and we kicked tail. We had a tremendous turnaround that lasted forever. And it wasn't about the markets. It was because people started to talk about we rather than me.
Beautiful. I wish I could sit here and just listen to you all day. But I have a show to do. And sadly, that's part of my show is I got to ask questions. But I need to also do this. His name is Brian Biro. The book, Lessons from the Legends, New Applications from the Timeless Wisdom of John Wooden and Pat Summitt. Absolutely brilliant, outstanding. Get it wherever books are sold. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Folks, Zoundy, love it. Love it. As an author, I have to tell you, when I got hooked up with Zoundy and started realizing that as I was giving away books and I was getting able to engage with my readers or listeners in this case, listening to my book and was able to start having conversations about what they enjoyed, what they didn't like about the book, I thought, oh my gosh, why isn't every author doing this? Well, listen, now every author can. You need to just check out Zoundy.com, Zoundy.com. And if you want to get great savings, go to Zoundy.com/J, Jay, and then put in my code JAY25. You'll get incredible savings. It's so easy. I'm telling you, it's a great platform. Unlike any of the other audiobook platforms out there, give away your book before you speak. Give away your book before you coach. You know what? Get engaged. And before, after, whenever, it's absolutely outstanding. Just go to Zoundy.com/J, enter my code JAY25. Linda Craft Team Realtors. Listen, what I find so fascinating is their website, lindacraft.com. I may be biased, but I do believe it is the best real estate website on the planet. I really do. And let me tell you why. Yeah, they have everything all the other websites do, but then here's what they've done. They've actually talked to like a child psychologist on how to move with children. And they put that information on there. They've talked to a veterinarian how to move with your animals and your pets. It's just so much great information beyond just real estate. And that's why I think it's probably the greatest real estate website on the planet. So check it out, lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend, well, we haven't officially made that official publicly, but we are right now. Brian Biro, Lessons from the Legends, a new application from the timeless wisdom of John Wooden and Pat Summitt. Terrific book. He's a terrific guest. So good. Enjoying it. I'm going to jump ahead here, Brian. We're going to jump to chapter 17 and get into some things that Coach Wooden has done with the pyramid of success, which you and I have talked about, and it's just so good too. I'm going to jump to 17, self-control. Again, I think this is another piece of our world that we don't talk about, we don't want to talk about, we don't emphasize, and that is maintaining self-control. And yet for Coach Wooden, it was incredibly powerful part of his pyramid of success. Talk us through self-control and its importance and why it's so powerful.
You know, it's at the heart of everything that John Wooden stood for. Self-control means that I'm not going to live my life focused on external approval. I'm not going to try to control other people. I'm going to focus on controlling what I do control, my effort, my energy, my attitude, on learning. Those were the things that, and here's you have studied John Wooden enough to understand, he didn't say these things once. Right? He said them a gazillion times. He said them every single day because that's what he did control. He controlled his effort, his energy, his attitude, his focus. And he wanted to impart that because we don't do that. I know we don't have a ton of time left because to me, the essence of what John Wooden demonstrated as far as self-control is also what was at the heart of Pat Summitt. And it's called being fully present. When I was with John Wooden, and one of the great gifts of my life was that he was my friend. Every time I left his presence, I felt like he thought I was the important person. And being fully present means 100% of your mind, body, and spirit is with the people you're with where they are now. Now, how many of us have ever been with somebody where no, their body's here, but the rest of them is off on some other planet? And here's a very important question. When we're with somebody and they're not fully present, what does that say to us? It says to us unmistakably, unmistakably, yeah, we're not important. We're worth less. And the only way that you can really exercise self-control is to be fully present and to be somebody who truly listens. And that was his magic. And Pat Summitt's too. Most of us don't listen. What we're doing is we're thinking about what we're going to say next while the other person is talking. And so Coach Wooden understood that I can listen first, be alert and pay attention to what somebody's saying beyond just their words. And then I'll know what to say. That takes a lot of self-control. And that means I'm going to not try to control others, but I'm going to control myself. And if I do that in the context of a team, we're going to get close to our true potential. Mm-hmm. So John Wooden not only felt it was a vitally important centerpiece of the entire pyramid, but it was what the whole pyramid was about. Mm-hmm. Is focus on the things you do control. And think about it, Jay, when we do focus on the things that we do control, man, we feel good. We feel momentum. We feel confident. We feel like we're making progress. It's when we try to focus on controlling others or the things we don't control that we feel frustrated, lost, angry, scared. And so they wanted to understand that really self-control, like everything in the pyramid, like everything in Pat Summitt's definite dozen, is an area of choice. And when we live with those choices and we focus on them every day, as they did, sooner or later, they become who we are. My favorite John Wooden quote, and he had a gazillion of them, was that be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is who you are. Your reputation, only what others think you are. And I like to add to that, if you live that way, if you stick with your focus on character, it will become your reputation.
So good. I want to, there's a quote from the book about self-control I just want to read, and would love to have you just expand on it. When you maintain self-control during the toughest times, you send an unmistakable message to others to maintain faith, enthusiasm, and focus. And we don't think about that when we think about self-control, but it's powerful.
It is the most beautiful essence of what made John Wooden so unique. People have tried to understand what made John Wooden. And I think a story that recognizes what you just said, that quote, in very simple kind of fun sports terms. When Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was at UCLA, probably the biggest college basketball game of all time was UCLA versus University of Houston. And the big player at that time at Houston was Elvin Hayes, one of the great players. And Lou Alcindor, later be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the week before that game, scratched his retina. That's why for the rest of his career, he wore goggles. So his entire week before the game, he did not practice. He was laying up with this, not even knowing if he could play. The game was played in Houston. I think UCLA at that time had won 73 straight games or something or other, maybe 88. I can't remember which number it was. They had two of those streaks. Well, Houston won the game 71-69. Coach Wooden was exactly the same guy in that tough moment when everybody was, than he was when they won national championships. And he went into the locker room and he was proud of his team and he gave credit to Houston. And he said to his team, "You played well. We may get another chance. When we do, we focus on the things that we do control. We might get another chance." Well, they met again in the NCAA playoffs and UCLA won by 40. All right. But it was because in the time of stress, he didn't blame others. He didn't make excuses. He didn't talk about Kareem's eye. He said, we're going to do the best of which we're capable in this moment. We're going to learn from it. We're going to get better. And that solidified that sense of confidence in every person on his team, because he was the same guy, whether they were 33-0 or they were, 25-5. It didn't matter. He never really that. So
I love everything about his whole. First of all, you're right about the quotes. There's not a bad quote. I can't think of ever quote that you go, no. All the quotes he's had, unbelievable quotes. 23 is team spirit. And here's something that you wrote here. Coach Wooden would look for one attribute more than any other when he was recruiting player, a burning desire to reach one's potential, but always in relationship to the team. And I know we've talked about, the team is most important, but he wanted players who prize the team over and above individual honors and efforts. It's so hard because we're so naturally selfish to want to look at ourselves, but to find a burning desire to reach our potential. That's what struck me, because I don't know that we do that either. I think we just kind of walk through life.
I think you're right. And I think one of the things that differentiated Coach Wooden from others was the way that he actually, in a concrete way, lived that team, team spirit, looking for people who focus on the team as being more important than any individual thing. If you look at his two greatest players, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, two of the greatest passers ever as centers. Two of the great. Bill Walton could completely control a game and score 2 points. He could also score 42 and 21 of 22 shooting if that was what was necessary, because it didn't matter to him. What mattered to him was, how do we do? But Coach Wooden really taught this in a powerful way. And that was, most of us only give recognition, acknowledgement, and praise when the job's done. We give praise. We give praise for the results.
Right.
Coach Wooden looked to give praise for what you put in. He was constantly looking for the extra hustle, for the unselfish pass, for the pick. Those were the things that he commented on much more than how many points you scored. And then how much he looked for the stuff that would never show up on the score sheet, would never show up on ESPN, if there had been ESPN in those days. He looked for the stuff that you controlled. And that helped every person. See, in his day, amazing thing, we got to think about it. He only played 7 of his 14 players most of the time. But everyone on his team felt important because he was looking for the things that they did control. And that's what he acknowledged. That's what he praised. That's what he honored. Whether you were Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or you were that 14th guy who never made it into a game but played for 4 years at UCLA basketball on the practice floor. To him, those were just as important as the one who would score 40 points.
Yeah. We've done our time here, Brian, and there's so much more to cover. Right. I never got to enough of it. I don't know if you're open to ever coming back and doing the show with me, but I would love to have you come back.
I love it.
And dig into this some more, because I would love to take this to another level, because there's just some things here. We never got to poise and confidence, which I really want to talk about, as well as so many other things, because they're just so important, and competitive greatness. We never got to, and a number of other things. I know you're a great speaker. I've listened to you. I've watched you. You're outstanding. Caught videos. If people want to hire you or they want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of Brian Biro?
Very simple. Just go to my website, brianbiro.com. And that's, I just turned 70 this past October. And I've been speaking 35 years, and I reached 1 million people in live events. My vision, my goal is to reach 1 million more by the time I turn 80. And so anybody get in touch with me. I love what I do. And what I do is really help you understand that you're not an overachiever. One of John Wooden's statements, that we all have more in us than we ever dreamed of. And my joy is to help people discover that more in them than they thought they had.
Beautiful. Brian, stay with me. Folks, this is the show. You know what I tell you? You're in control of 3 things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. The fact of the matter is life doesn't always give us what we want. Sometimes life happens that we can't control, but you know what you can control is you control your attitude. It's not always easy, but you can do it. It's a choice. Your effort is tied to your excellence. And I know that some days we have more gas in the tank than others, but how excellent will you choose to be today? And then finally, resilience. We all get punched in the gut, knocked down in the teeth, but it's up to you to get back up, and you need to get back up. And you want to know why? Because you're worth it, and we want you on the team. I'll be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It means it's going to be another great show. As I say to you all over the world, you got a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you for doing that. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube and wherever you're listening. Give us a positive review. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.